I think to assume that the same tools one uses in the US would apply to Africa I don't think that's very helpful. But then on the other hand, there is the kind of approach of the Africans as hapless and, you need to spoon feed them what they need. Africans know what they need.
Hello and welcome to the Africa News Network.
When I attend sort of conferences at American universities, and when they start to talk about data from Africa, and I can talk about Nigeria because I know Nigeria well, I'm often asking, how did you collect this data? Because I know Nigeria, and I'm like, how? Honestly. So even that is already, I think, problematic. But then there are other things like people who I think that simple things would be helpful, like listening, right? Like going to these places and actually listening and realizing that you don't have to use the same tools that you use in the US in Africa. It doesn't have to be the same to achieve the same results. And an example would be a friend of mine who's a doctor in England, and he's Nigerian. We grew up together, and he was telling me how he had gone with a team back to Nigeria, and his English friends were all horrified because they thought Nigerian doctors were not doing enough about patient privacy and letting the patient make the decision. And I just remember thinking, but you have to think about things in their context. There's some people who are not equipped with the knowledge to make that kind of decision, right? And so we have to assume that the doctor means the best for the patient and can sort of guide the patient. That it's not the years. I remember coming here and being a bit frustrated by doctors who just would say to me, well, what do you think? And I'm thinking, well, you went to medical school, I didn't. What do you think? Right? And on the one hand, there's a part of me that understands, obviously, the need to have the patient, to carry the patient along, but it can seem, and obviously I'm in a position to make decisions because I'm educated, I can, but there are people who aren't. And I think to assume that the same tools one uses in the US would apply to Africa I don't think that's very helpful. But then on the other hand, there is the kind of approach of the Africans as hapless and, you need to spoon feed them what they need. Africans know what they need. And I'm a great believer in local knowledge, and I'm a great believer in listening to people. And there's something about being in a very sort of places like this, Hopkins, Harvard, and that kind of thing, that makes people think that they know all the answers. And I think it's very useful to start off thinking that one doesn't know all the answers, especially in places like ours. I mean, Africa, the African continent is, in its complexity, in its diversity, in its wonder, in its magic, it's important to keep that in mind, I think. For people who are doing very, very useful work. I didn't think of myself as black until I came to the US. And so discovering blackness, becoming black in America was one of the things I wanted to write about, and what it meant, and how I started off pushing it away, rejecting it, saying to people in undergrad, they would say, come to Black Students Union. I'd be like, no, I'm not black, I'm Nigerian. And I realize now, looking back, even that I did that is an indictment of racism in America. Why was I rejecting blackness? I mean, if blackness is completely value-free, why was I rejecting it? But I was rejecting it because I knew that in this country, it's not value-free, that it's automatically something to which all kinds of negative stereotypes are attached. And I had the professor at Drexel who was surprised that I wrote this essay. And when he saw me, he was like, and I realized, again, he didn't expect me to be black, especially as I was using my initial, not my name. So I wanted to write about, and of course now I've become very happily black, right? And it took a process. I mean, and I think also that blackness in some ways is also a political identity that one takes by choice. You can look black in the world, but there's a kind of knowing that you're accepting that you're black, loving that you're black, which I have come to do. And it's a very American thing, right? Because when I get on the plane and I get off in Lagos, I don't remember race. It doesn't occur to me to think about how many black people are in this room. I don't even have to think about it when I'm here. I know already because I've looked, just one look, and I know how many black faces are here. And I can bet you every black person in this country does that. Because you kind of want to know who will have your back if something happens. No, I'm kidding. Well, I'm actually only half kidding. for us, as people who are Black but not African American, to engage with the history of African Americans and to understand how there's a lot that we're able to do today that is really a direct consequence of sacrifices that were made by African Americans. And I sometimes think that that's not something that's as sort of engaged with in immigrant communities of color, that it's very easy to sit back and enjoy the privileges we have and kind of look down on people who, because of the policies in this country, have been held back.